Exporting is where a great animation can become a great file, or even, unfortunately, a completely unusable one. In this video, we're going to export the same After Effects composition we've been working on using two different methods, the render queue and the Adobe Media Encoder. We're going to compare different formats, codecs, presets, file locations, and multiple delivery versions. So in our last lesson, we kind of dropped in a basic video into After Effects. We haven't really applied much motion design to it, but today we're going to really think about, once the video is complete and the motion design is complete, let's say maybe we added logos here or any sort of effects, how do we get it out of the After Effects app? Rendering is actually the process of calculating the frames created by your layers, different effects, animation, and composition settings. Exporting packages those rendered frames into a finished file or image sequence that can be viewed outside the After Effects app. If we're creating a stop motion animation, we might want to take a series of photographs and images and turn them into an MP4 sequence. Or if we're creating a video for YouTube, we want to make sure that it is 1920 by 1080 and in horizontal format. If we want to create a video in TikTok, that may be more in a vertical format. The Adobe export tools will define rendering as creating the frames of a movie from the layers, settings, and other information inside your composition. Before we export, we always preview the entire composition. I do this by hitting the space bar, and one important thing to note is there's some factors that will tell you what will render and what won't render. The first one is the eyeball. If I go to my layers and I look at the eyeball layer and I turn that off, if I go ahead and hit the space bar again, you're gonna notice that nothing appears. Now, if I were to render this composition right now, guess what? It would be completely black. We don't want that. You always want to double check to make sure not only the eyeball is on, but you don't have other things like if the sound is on or off. In this case, we don't have any sound, or if a layer is soloed and you have a ton of layer solos. We'll talk about that in another lesson. But those are the first steps to kind of making sure that what you see up here is going to actually render. The other note for rendering is you can actually set in and out points. If you don't want to render an entire video, but let's say we want to render 2 seconds to maybe 4 seconds, we can do that. And it's actually quite easy. I'm going to go over to my time code and I'm going to left click and type 200. That's going to get me 2 seconds. And I'm going to move this little work start area to that current time indicator. You can also hit B on your keyboard. I'm going to then go back and type 400 for 4 seconds. Those are great shortcuts, by the way, for your exam if you're taking the ACP, because you can hop to specific time codes very quickly. And I can grab now the end of the work area with my left mouse button and drag it in, or hit the N key to drag that in. So now if I hit spacebar, you're noticing that we just have a specific in and out point, and that work area will be the element that can export. Now, if you don't want this, it's really easy. You just left click and drag these back to the full composition, hit spacebar, and there you have it. So another fun little kind of tip. At any point, mind you, you can hit your Control or Command Z to go back and adjust as you see fit. So those are all different things to look at when you're deciding what is going to render and what isn't going to render. We are really just starting with the basics right now, so we're not going to dive too deep into this, but let's talk about how to render this within the After Effects app. To do this, we're going to start with the render queue. The first step is you want to make sure you're highlighting the composition you want to render. Remember in our last video, we actually have this blank composition. We don't want to accidentally be looking at this, but having the other composition highlighted. Make sure you're highlighting the composition that you want to export. We're going to then go to Composition, Add to Render Queue. Now, when I do this, it's going to open up a new tab that is known as my render queue. And I'm going to expand this up just a little bit so you can see some of the settings. This is a way to export things directly from the app. Now, my best tip for you here is whenever you see blue text in After Effects, that typically means you can click on it. And another little hint for that, real quick, as a detour, If I go back to that time code, guess what color that is? Blue. That means I can click on it. In the Render Queue tab, and again, if you click away by accident, go to Composition, Add to Render Queue, it's going to just add another version. So you can see now I have 2 of those because I added to them, and I can always hit delete on one of them and adjust. You can even go ahead and hit check or set the render export. If you're trying to export multiple compositions at once, this is really nice. Some settings to look into. First, we'll click on Best Settings. What this is going to focus on is really the resolution, things like the composition's frame rate, if you have any proxies or specific elements you want. So let's say maybe we are trying to get a preview for a client. We may only render half or a third of the composition. Now, by lowering that composition, it's no longer an HD file, but it's a lower res one that's going to render a lot more quickly so you can see the final product. I'm going to keep mine toward full to get started. Another one is we have different settings, so we can render in wireframe draft just to kind of get an idea of what that looks like. Just going through some of the settings, we can do that work area only, like we mentioned. If you had set that work area to be smaller, this is the button you would check. Or if you're afraid that you're going to accidentally make the work area smaller, you can always revisit the length of comp, which will just be the entire timeline of the element that you selected. Finally, we can customize the start and end point or the duration of the render based on our preferences of the project that we have. And when we get to a point we like, we can hit OK, and it's going to adjust this. And this is a little hint to tell you that you have it completely finished. The next element that we can look into is essentially, and we're going to skip over output. We're going to go to output 2. This is going to focus on where you put your file. So when I click on this, this is going to give me, for instance, my desktop, in which I can say my first movie. And I have the ability to adjust where the file will be saved and what it will be named. I can also create a subfolder if I need, but what I can't do here is change the file's export format. That's in another place, but this is just to change the name and where you're going to have it located. So I'm going to hit save real quick, and that's going to update that as well. Now, if you're looking at the format of the file, this is where the output module is going to come into play. So once again, I'm going to click on the blue text, and what's happening here is you're going to really want to learn about 2 different terms, format and codec. Format is the type of container or type the file is, and codec is how the media is encoded. These are 2 terms you want to understand. The format could be something like QuickTime or H.264 output, and the codec is actually what determines the video size and how it's compressed and how it's encoded. 2 files can have the same frame size, same duration, but one file can be gigs large while other files can be only megabytes. This is done through codec. You should really choose based on what your delivery requirements are and not just simply which creates the smallest file, because sometimes you're going to want a really large file for quality, or if it's going to different types of broadcast, you name it. Now, if we're exporting from our render code, you can see by default, mine is already set to that in format. But let's say we wanted to change this, and maybe we wanted to make this video a image sequence, a QuickTime file, therefore an MOV file, or even a Photoshop sequence. I can go ahead and adjust these within the Format tab. I'm going to go ahead and keep mine to H.264 to help. And then here I have some ability to adjust channels. If I just wanted to render an alpha channel, I can resize the video, I can crop, I can even adjust what type or quality of audio is going to be rendered. Now, the next thing to look at is the format options. When you go into format options, this is how you can adjust based on the output. For instance, if you're putting this up for streaming and you want to make sure the file looks decent in quality, but also has a smaller file size, this is where we would come in and adjust things like constant bitrate or variable bitrate, which, to be honest, you won't see those things as much on the ACP exam in 2025 or 2026. So just be mindful that that is there and ready to go. I'm going to hit cancel there. I just wanted to show you that this is kind of how we control what the codec is doing within the elements. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK there. And at that point, I have all of my different files ready to go. And here we're ready to start the render. All we have to do at this point, we know where it's going to our desktop, is hit render. And it's going to go through this file. It's going to give us some info. Now, the larger file you have, the longer this will take, but it's going to have a nice little beep. And on your desktop, you'll find a nice .mp4 file with that H.264 format. Another way to do this is if you aren't in After Effects and you're doing maybe a larger file sequence, is to go back to composition, still having your comp selected, and add to Adobe Media Encoder. Now, this button is going to open a completely separate app from the Adobe Creative Cloud. The good news here is the Adobe Media Encoder comes with Creative Cloud, and so you will have it. You don't need to purchase it on top of getting After Effects. It kind of comes with that as you can work with it. Now, this tool is actually really, really nice because, and it's loading up on my other screen, I'll pull it over in a second, is it actually allows you to work outside of After Effects. Let's say you already have After Effects files, and let me drag this on so you can see. We can actually drag in those After Effects files, or maybe you have a pre-existing file that you really want to drag in and do some work on. So I'm actually going to left click drag the render that we made just a second ago and drag that into Media Encoder. And here you can set up kind of all these different presets depending on the file that you have selected. We still have a lot of similar options. We can click on blue text. We can use drop downs. Maybe I want to convert this H.264 to something like, I don't know, a sound only MP3. This has no sound. That wouldn't really make sense, but just to show you, I can go ahead and do that. Or I can click and I can say, well, I really want to convert this to a QuickTime. That's what my client needs. And to adjust the settings, I can go ahead and click on the various settings. That's going to open up this export settings window, and it'll really allow me to dial in deep to some of those export settings themselves. Things like in and out points. I can kind of change where it's named. So it's essentially very similar to the Adobe Render Queue, but you're just getting a lot more presets, a lot more options. You can add things like content credentials, which is really great. You can even go and have it published directly to things like Facebook and YouTube and specific servers, which is really helpful depending on the type of work that you're doing. So again, clicking on the blue elements allows you to bring up this kind of dialog box called export settings and really just adjust as you see fit. Look at all of the different presets or codecs that are in here and all of the different file formats that you can choose from. Just dialing in a little more detail as you go. The final element that you want to click on is if you want to rename this, you can click on this blue text and you can select the folder of your choice, whatever that may be, hit save, there you have it. Now, again, if you don't like one of these, you can hit the delete key on it and hit yes, and it will delete it. When you're ready to render or output, you're going to just hit the play button here, and we're going to hit play. And just like it did in After Effects, in this point in Adobe Media Encoder, it's going to render that pretty quickly. And doesn't give us the nice beep, but it did render out to our desktop. Just a couple of different ways that you can export your files. Once you've exported a file, I always will recommend going, finding that file, opening it up, and just making sure it plays back and there's no massive quality loss. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to our desktop. You can see we have the two movies we exported. I'm gonna hit my space bar because I'm on a Mac. And you can see not too bad of quality loss. Let's look at that first movie we made. There we have it. The differences are subtle, but both of them are there. I always check to make sure, again, the movie plays through. And in closing, this gives you an idea now how to take a project. And again, in our case, this is very simple, but take eventually a complex project with maybe 50, 60 layers and export it and get it out of Adobe After Effects kind of in that flattened format as an MP4 or an MOV file, depending on the project brief and the needs. In the next video, we're going to learn a little bit about more of the internal tools in Adobe After Effects and really diving deep into creating things like solids and text here using the toolbar in the top of the screen. Go ahead and take some time to now practice exporting for yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.